Hello, everyone, and welcome to NorthStar community. Always look forward to doing these talks and helping in some way to support all of us as we go through our journey in recovery. As we know, recovery is a beautiful experience, but it's also very difficult and it's tough. And so we're going to talk about one of those tough subjects today, and that is called resentment. So I always loved the great line I saw one time in a movie. A guy was accurately describing a guy for his flaws, basically, and the guy goes, "Hey, wait a minute, I resemble that remark," instead of saying I resent that remark. And I always think, oh my gosh, that's just so perfect for what we feel and what we do when we're busy being in the world of resentment. And so we're going to talk about resentment real quick tonight to kind of understand it and figure out, just some of the ways that it affects us. And it's so good to understand how we do these things, and it just really makes a difference in how we are behaving. And so resentment, I call it the hidden joy thief, and I think that's a great way to put it. And I remember seeing this. It was in a bulletin from the Congregational Church in Red Cloud, Nebraska, where I grew up, 1981. What if God's ordering of the universe was dependent on the goodness and justice of man? It would be a world of chaos and disorder. But God's pattern is not, if you are just, I will be just. No, God's pattern is one of goodness and justice for all. Good and evil, just and unjust, prior to any human response. And the ultimately astounding thing about God is this: God calls us to love our enemies and pray for our persecutors, because this is what God does. Such love is God's perfection. I always thought that was such a great talk. And so resentment is one of those. It's a subject I don't really like to talk about because I know I'm guilty. It's like I was telling the group as we met this week. I said, you know what? When I started out my talk on resentment, I know I have someone I have huge amounts of resentment towards, and I really do need to deal with it. But I started going, wait a minute. For long, I've had like 6 people that I'm holding resentments towards. And you know what? That's not good. That's not good for me. And so I need to figure out how to deal with these things. And I'm going to read Psalms 51. There's probably some other scriptures out there I could have read, but this is David obviously in trouble again. So, and he's writing to God. Generous in love, God give grace. Huge in mercy, wipe out my bad record. Scrub away my guilt. Soak out my sins in your laundry. I know how bad I've been. My sins are staring me down. Well, the problem with resentment is we don't always know that we're in resentment land, and it's something we have to work at. So, continue, Psalm 51. I learned God worship when my pride was shattered. Heart-shattered lives, ready for love. Don't for a moment escape God's notice. Pretty good. And that's what we're talking about with resentment. It's so easy for us to not even recognize we're in resentment land. And that's why I think this talk hopefully will help us see that. So resentment, it's a form of anger, and it's built around a strong sense of fairness and unfairness. And that's what's important. So if you have resentments, which I think probably all of us have some level of resentment, think about probably lots being driven by what's right, what's wrong, what's fair, what's unfair. And so the problem with the resentment, it isn't near as intense as anger, but it lasts longer. And that's what makes it so difficult. And the other thing is that resentment requires lower levels of arousal, but resentment lasts much longer than anger. So it takes some point to get me mad, but when I get mad, I get really mad, and I feel kind of stupid about it, and then I move on. But resentment, I get angry, I don't deal with it in the proper ways, and it's towards someone, and then I hold that resentment toward them, and I keep it going. And I don't know it some of the times. And of course, some of the resentment really is about me, right? Because really what it is, it's a defensive way of devaluing and mentally retaliating against others we see as treating us unfairly. So sometimes maybe they have more power than us, things like that. That can add to the resentments. The problem with resentment is it's usually not specific, and it rarely goes away. So if you said to me, why are you so resentful? It may not be as clear as why you're angry. And it's a generalized defense against an unfair relationship or an environment that's unfair. Resentment will persist despite changes in the behavior that caused it. And for example, if I'm really angry and I have resentments towards someone and they actually apologize to me, that may not be enough for me to not continue with resentment. It's a very powerful way to go. And let's be honest, I like to refer to it as a drug. Anger is a tool to put out our fires. Resentment is more like a smoke alarm that's always on. So that also helps with, our cortisol levels are probably a little high. Us that have come through trauma, abandonment issues, we're going to be a little bit more delicate on these things. We're a little bit more quicker to see threats. And so resentment can really become powerful to us. So resentment's kind of hard to describe. And by the time you know you're resentful, it may be in advanced stages. It may be too late for you to not have some damage done. You can always change things. You can always fix things. So also I think it's important to kind of figure out, resentment is a mood. It's not a feeling. So when we have feelings, we do this, we go up and down. We're very angry at one moment, might be glad, happy for a moment, but those are fleeting and they change, right, over time, depending on what's going on. Anger tends to be like this. It's just steady and it continues to grow and grow. And so the problem is when we try to deal with our resentments, we try to treat it as a emotion like anger or helplessness or something like that, when the fact is it's a mood and it's ongoing, and we have to treat it with more of a way of looking at it than how we deal with a feeling. And let's be honest, resentment's a great form of self-punishment, and that's what makes it so darn destructive. Is it's such an appealing thing because it gives us a false sense of power and control, and where we really are feeling pretty out of control. So what a great way to punish us as well as punish the others. So we're harming ourselves as we harm someone else, as we keep ourselves safe from someone, from future hurt and disappointments. And that's one of the problems with resentment. It does take us into the future, and that makes it really destructive. The other problem with resentment is it tends not to be one thing. It tends to be like a chain with the links. They come together. Before long, you have a long chain built around lots of links of resentment, and they become stronger and stronger. And the problem is that minor events look the same and carry the same weight as serious matters. And that really gives us trouble. So let's be honest, when we're in resentment land and it's towards someone, some individual or an organization, I don't care what they do, they're never going to do it right. It's never going to be enough. It's going to be too much, too late, too soon, whatever. We're going to continue to have resentments, and we'll just keep piling on resentments and resentments. And once again, it's about attacking ourselves. We just don't see it. And also, it's a way that we try to keep ourselves safe. But it doesn't work very good, right? And so a lot of this, with NorthStar, we talk a lot about trauma and abandonment and childhood neglect. Those three things we always pay attention to. And, so if some of us have PTSD, which is sudden, we're exposed and we can't escape from that negative stimulus. CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is sudden, but it's also gradual and it's ongoing, and we continue to have to get through it, and we can't get away from it. That's what makes it so hard. So when we start having resentments, when we start having triggers, when we have unforgiveness, all those, we have this thing called secondary symptoms, where we have those feelings of negativity, we have feelings of anger, all those things, and it grows into a resentment chain. It just grows and grows and grows. And the problem then is we turn on ourselves because we know it's not the right thing. At some point we do. It takes a while, but we do. And then we go into secondary symptom land, where we start to see and feel things about ourselves that are very negative. We see ourselves as powerless. We tell ourselves that we shouldn't be feeling these things. We should be better. We should be over this. We should be forgiving. We shouldn't have all this anger. And like we like to kiddingly say, is we're shoulding all over ourselves. That's when you know you're in secondary land, and that's a very good hint to you that you're now in resentment land as well. So the problem is when we get there, we start to use resentment as a drug of choice, because it is so appealing. Again, think about it. You feel unempowered. You feel disassociated. You feel disappointed. You feel sad. All those things. Resentment can give us a false sense of power. when the fact is we're being passive aggressive and we're harming ourselves. The great saying is that I drink the poison and I expect the other person to die. That is just such a great way to describe resentment. And so with most of us who lived with trauma, our natural coping skills, cooperating and trust, all those things that should have worked, haven't worked very good for us. We've tried to make the best of situations, right? But a lot of times in abusive settings, it backfired and our goodness was used against us. And so our noble efforts to salvage or repair a traumatic situation may only have delayed our suffering, and that creates lots of resentments. So we have a lot of resentments, low-grade anger. I call it a low-grade fever of resentments. We're hurt. We choose to fight or flee or freeze, one of those three, right? And if we're shame-based, we're also going to respond by feeling lots of shame and lots of guilt about things we probably don't need to be. But that adds to our resentment. And that's what we don't want. Again, I resemble that remark is so accurate for so many of us. So we with resentment, we respond in addictive ways because of our complex PTSD. Anger and resentment become a very tempting drug of choice, and the analgesic effect of anger temporarily relieves our pain. So our anger and resentment cycle hits a trauma trigger hits us, a memory, whatever it was that really creates this physiological reaction to our trauma, and then we start to grow resentful towards ourselves, but also to others, right? And that anger gives us energy, it gives us confidence, it gives us a sense of power, maybe even a sense of direction, right? And then the amphetamine crash happens. So it's just like a drug, right? And then the loss of the energy and the power drops. So we even go lower than before because we've created problems. We've realized how weak we are and how so self-doubt, self-blame, depression, all the things, and then we start over. And each time that we start over, we're lower and we're more depressed. So then the problem is that for us, it's kind of living in our pain, kind of passively, aggressively holding resentments towards someone but never telling them about it, being low-grade fever anger and just living it and rolling in it, all that stuff. It doesn't make a bit of sense, but you know what? It's another form of what we talk about with addiction, habitual behavior to avoid pain. It's another great example of that, right? So we're doing this on a roller coaster of emotions, just mad, angry, maybe with some happiness there, and then we just keep going, and finally after a while we just become joyless because we're so addicted to resentment. And that wall we talk about, porcupine index, that wall we build around ourselves, it keeps us safe, but it keeps us lonely. We don't deal with stuff, and what do? We become joyless, and we become suspicious of real emotions, and resentment again becomes our drug of choice. I hope that this has helped you a little bit. There's some ways to overcome resentment, but we're not going to take time tonight to talk about it. We'll do that next time. But we're talking about that secondary land of developing a value chart that you can go to when you start feeling this way. When you go into secondary land and you're feeling all those negative emotions about resentment, we can talk about you developing that. But the other thing, I think this is a more simple one, and it's hard to do. I found it hard for me anyway, but it has helped me. There's no question I would tell you that. Got this from Norman Vincent Peale, one of my favorite Christian writers. He said that for the targets of our resentment, the people who resent the most, we need to pray that they'll be wildly successful. Pray for them that they'll be wildly successful. That is a form of kind of forced forgiveness, but it's a way of us facing our resentment, saying it out loud, and doing something positive with it. It's not going to solve your issues with resentment, but it makes me become aware of the resentments I have. And it's helped me. A couple people I have a huge amount of resentment towards has helped me feel better about them, and of course, which means better about myself. So no magic here. Like I said, next time we'll talk about how to develop some things you can do to help you overcome your secondary land emotions, because those are really difficult, but you can manage those. You can't do anything about triggers. You can't do anything about, once you're in resentment land, but you can start looking at ways to help reduce it and get you past it. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I appreciate you joining me today. It's always great to be on this journey of recovery. And I will tell you, this subject, when we bring it up in NorthStar, it can be pretty emotional. It triggers people, which is good because we all need to see it. Because again, remember, resentment is based on fairness or unfairness, which also moves to forgiveness and unforgiveness. But the problem is we don't see it. And what it is it becomes a drug of choice for us. And so hopefully this will help you all see that you are living with resentment, and we need to overcome it for us to continue in our recovery. We will not recover if we're carrying a lot of resentment. So again, remember, I drink the poison and I expect the other person to die doesn't work. So anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope this was helpful. We meet on Wednesdays and Fridays at 6:30. We have full meals and we have childcare, and we'd love to have you come. You can come dressed as you are. If you just come from work, that's good. If you're coming from home, you can dress down. We don't care. But the good part is that we'll listen to you, we'll support you, and really be here for you. And we're not going to tell you what to do, but we're here to support you. So anyway, thanks for joining, and I hope your recovery continues in a way that will make you strong, and you'll actually experience a rich, full, meaningful life. So let's close with a prayer of serenity. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever and next. Amen. Jesus knows your heart. Jesus loves you. He knows your true self. Let go of those resentments so you don't have to keep going, I resemble that remark, and so you can live a life that's full of love and meaning.